now we would like to introduce you to the panel Investment in Conservation, integrated by Isabel Peters and Dr. Gildardo Sanchez. And with our amazing moderator, who's the director of the AI for Climate Initiative, Christopher Cordova. I'm going to introduce you three for this panel. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to introduce Christopher first. He's a co-founder and director of AI for Climate. He's a renowned conservationist, author, and speaker. He has founded Nonsuch, a natural reserve in a fragile desert ecosystem. Christopher also has a long experience in advising political and corporate leaders to protect natural reserves, and he is a passionate advocate for natural reserves and conservation. I'm going to also introduce Isabel. Isabel Peters is part of our board of advisors. She's also an advisor to the board of Alpenrose Wealth AG. She has considerable experience in financial consulting and is an expert in impact investments for social good and environment. And Dr. Gildardo is a doctor in computational science, member of the National System of Researchers, visiting researcher at Stanford University and the National University of Singapore. He is interested in the development and application of pattern recognition algorithms and currently the director of the Polytechnic University of Yucatan. Welcome, you three.
Thank you very much.
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much and welcome to this panel, which will be investments in conservation. Well, we will start by posing two questions, and basically that's the way we will be developing this conversation. One is, what is out there? What is out there in terms of investment opportunities for the sustainability and particularly for the conservation efforts? What's out there in the international scene? And on the other side, what is needed? What is needed on the ground to support, to amplify efforts for conservation, be it research, development, deployment of technology, training? What is needed on the ground in terms of financing and support in general for that kind of projects that can help us protect our natural reserves? So first, let's start with you, Isabel.
Thank you, Christopher.
One first question.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me on this panel, Christopher. I'm very happy to be part of this board and of this effort. I think it's wonderful to be able to share this panel with you, with Mr. Sanchez, and also with the audience. And I wanted to quickly give a little overview of the sustainable investment market, because as you said, what is available today? Well, I mean, very surprisingly, there's a lot available today, because we're talking about a market that in 2019 was worth more than $30 trillion. So we're not talking about a niche market anymore. This is a big market, and even during the pandemic, it has intensified. The awareness of the need for environmental and societal issues has really intensified, and we've seen it through Zooms on from the Financial Times, from The Economist, and from a lot of other institutions. So we're very much aware. So people are very much aware of the need, and so there's a lot of demand from the investor for these kinds of efforts. At the same time, even though this might seem a big number, it's still not enough, right? It's still not enough, even not enough to reach the basic objectives established by the Paris agreements. So we need much more money, and much more money for these worldwide conservation projects. But and therefore we need the participation of the whole society. And by the whole society, what do I refer? I refer to governments, municipalities, institutions, corporations, institutional investors, and individuals. So all these agents have to participate and have to come together. And the capital markets is, for example, one place where all these people can come together. And as Gemma said, you know, the Mexican government has issued a 750 million euro bond just right now in September, which was very successful, extremely successful. And so this is one of the things that the capital markets are taking care of. But of course, there are other alternatives. So if we look, for example, at the governments, as I said, they can issue bonds. And we're talking about governments or municipalities, and they can issue green bonds. And this was really promoted by the Paris Agreements in 2016. But so right now we have green bonds, blue bonds, which are more focused on marine life, social bonds, and sustainability bonds. Right, so this is one of the ways that we can finance the projects in AI for climate and the initiatives we have. Then another way of financing it is, of course, having, well, and these initiatives can be backed, of course, also by international institutions like the World Bank, who can give guarantees, help to structure these instruments, and also, for example, the Development Bank of Latin America, where Mexico has right now a very important role. Mexico is now a full member, and the institutions like the Global Environment Facility, who can also help pay part of the interest that these bonds have to pay. So all these international institutions, and there are of course more, are very helpful, but because they also give a lot of security to the investors and help to the governments. But then also, as I said, we also need the participation of corporations or companies. Why? Because as we have seen during the, from yesterday to today, all the companies that have participated at this forum, companies are worried today, and they know they have to participate. They know they're part of an ecosystem, and we all have to participate at making this a better world. And so corporations have set aside budgets to help initiatives like AI for climate, and to help financially, and with also technology, human resources, etc. So corporations are another source of financing, definitely. And then, as I said, the institutional investors, they are the ones who will be buying these bonds, right? They will be selecting these bonds. We're the first one who bought the green bonds, and we're talking about pension funds, insurance companies, because they know that in the long term, what their investors and their clients are looking for are, also sustainable goals. People don't want just to be rich anymore. They want to do it responsibly also. They want to be responsible, and they're looking for serious alternatives. And so another option would be, of course, the foundations. And we're talking about international foundations or local foundations which have more a philanthropic orientation. And we have been working on different applications for foundations to obtain also, of course, resources from different foundations, from the Prince Albert II Foundation, who also take care of the oceans, to other kinds of foundations all over the world. And then also the individual. The individual is very important. Why? Because we see that today, even if individuals can be passive investors through buying bonds or participating passively, they also want to be active. And today, technology with fintech, for example, has given a possibility to people to participate in crowdfunding initiatives, where we have initiatives like AI for Climate, who can propose, the funding on a platform like that. And then the individual is much more involved in the project and feels closer to the project. So this digital inclusion is another form of financing projects, which will grow a lot in the future. So this, I'm trying to give a quick overview of it because, you know, there's a lot out there, but at the same time, what I really wanted to say also is that since there's a lot out there, it's also very confusing for the investors, and not only for individual investors, also for professional investors. It's not easy to know who is greenwashing or impact washing, which means that they cannot prove their real impact, or serious institutions like AI for Climate. And I think the forum that has been organized during these 2 days is essential in the education and in the transparency towards the public in general and the investors, which is very important, because for us it might seem very logic and very easy to see what you refer to as AI for climate. But it's not that easy to think of. If you're just a person on a day-to-day basis working in your job, you say AI, AI is all over, and now AI for climate. So, the forum, I think, has brought a lot of clarity and transparency and real examples, and has shown that we cooperate with governments, with private companies, with local communities. And so this gives to the investor a clear understanding, and that's what we really need to have the participation of governments, of corporations, of individuals, and of institutional investors. Sorry for taking so much time, but that's in a nutshell what I think are the most important things we have access to today.
Thank you very much, Isabel. That's an excellent answer. And now, please, Gilardo, tell us a little bit about what is needed on the ground.
Right, thank you, and a pleasure to be here. I agree totally with what Isabel has said, and I believe that particularly in countries like Mexico, that we are trying to foster the applications of artificial intelligence into these kinds of problems. This is very important because we are following a mature process where probably at the very beginning it is more important the investment that the government can make or can encourage through the public policy, and then once you create a certain confidence that these kind of investments can generate some sort of revenue for companies, you also encourage the participation of private fundings. But on the needs, we can also analyze different perspectives. Of course, in the short term, we could talk about that in many cases, the first need would be, for instance, in the case of Mexico, that we have this natural areas network. The thing is that the area protected has been growing steadily, but what hasn't grown in the same rate is the amount of people that is taking care of those areas. And that is a risk because at the end, you don't really have any control or any information of what is happening on those areas. And I mean, it is important to grow the area, but it is also important to provide the means to keep it, to protect it. And one possibility, of course, is to increase the participation of artificial intelligence tools in order to do that. And that means, of course, buying technology. We were talking yesterday about the use of drones, which is becoming more and more common, but sometimes it is not just acquiring the technology, the hardware itself, but also all the process that you have to do later with the videos or the images that you are capturing, that you need to process in order to bring the information to the people that is making all the decisions. And that also requires sometimes licensing costs or to pay for the developers that will be developing a ad hoc solution for the problem that you have. And the other thing that I believe it is very important to take into consideration, and was also one of the topics that last night we were mentioning, is the communications. Once you go to these areas and you deploy the sensors, assuming that you have the money to buy them, the problem becomes how you collect the data, how you gather the data. And in many cases, those areas are completely isolated from the rest of the let's say, the network. So you have to provide the connectivity from the area or some sort of data collector there to the rest of the community so that the information can flow and the people can analyze and process that. So I believe that summarizing what is needed in the first approach would be technology, mainly for the telecommunications. Of course, the technology to deploy sensors in those areas or to gather the information is also important. And of course, another issue is the training. We have a limited amount of people that is able to develop those tools, to understand the technology for the application, the connection between the AI tools and the real problems. And we have to encourage more of that. And that could also make use of the universities, both at undergrad and graduate levels. So we can invite the students, and not just as volunteers, but hiring them somehow to work on these kinds of projects, and you reach several goals at the same time. For one goal, you sensibilize the students on the importance of taking care of nature. But on the other hand, you provide a mean in which they can apply the knowledge that they are learning at the university, and they can see that what they are learning can have a huge impact on these sort of applications. So scholarships could also be important in that case. And of course, the funding to develop both research and development project that may include all these elements as a whole. So that would be probably the first suggestion that I would make.
Excellent. Yesterday we had an extraordinary workshop with many local institutions in Yucatan that will become the natural reserve, the living lab stakeholders here in Yucatan for component 1 of Air for Climate, which is the living labs. And really, it was quite interesting what happened there, because we came to realize that one factor that can really strengthen a project is, of course, the community involvement, particularly a conservation project, of course, the community involvement, but at the same time, the creation of a local ecosystem of these other institutions, particularly the academic institutions, research centers, experts, and authorities, of course. So we call this, in Air for Climate, we call this the natural reserve stakeholders. And it can really be a very diverse group of stakeholders. And here a question for you both. Besides the community involvement, besides creating an ecosystem that can really include a really vast array of institutions and individuals, what else can make a conservation project more attractive for the investment, the sustainable investment, and the impact investment world?
Well, I think definitely. You need to look at what can be measured, right? Because although everybody will contribute a lot, and that's also a problem today, because, for example, within the AI for Climate, it's we are really in the tech for good, and it's a very innovative concept. It's very new. So people want to know how you're going to measure, the impact. And that's something that today, even the institutional investors, they promise reporting to their investors. So what was the impact generated, right? So if everybody is working together, and that is wonderful, but then how are you going to measure that these synergies that are generated? How is this, how does this benefit translate to something that you can really measure? And I would think that that is a very important point.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was reading about this natural capital definition on how you can invest money into natural resources protection or regeneration. But of course, one of the first things that you really need is to establish metrics so that the investors, either they are private or public or even governments or foundations, they can understand how those investments are making an impact. So, and sometimes those things probably are not happening. So the other thing is the most important probably aspect of these kind of problems is that they cannot be solved by only considering one of the perspectives. If you only try to use the artificial intelligence without considering the social impact, the economic impact, and many others, then you are risking the project and it may fail because you didn't consider the whole thing. So it is, I would say, mandatory that for these kind of projects, all the different perspectives are taken into consideration, and in order to generate like a more holistic definition of the problem and also the way that we are tackling it.
Probably one aspect that is key here, following what you just said, is navigating the complexity. And actually that's why we insist so much at the same time on the importance of simplifying, really simplifying things, but it doesn't mean excluding key factors. It means including them and then being able to simplify them in order to present measurable topics, measurable initiatives. So that would be extraordinary. Do you have any other comment before proceeding to the questions?
Well, I think sometimes it's difficult because you want to innovate, but with that innovation, it also becomes more difficult to beforehand present all the measurements, right? So you have to leave, and I think it's very important also that the investment community and the governments understand that although you want to present all these measurements, that there has to be some room for innovation. Because if it's very strict, then where do they have room to innovate, right? So especially for AI for climate, which is something very new, there has to be some room for innovation and growth in technological growth and new initiatives that maybe cannot be measured yet, that will be measured in the future, right?
Yeah, and probably the other thing that we may consider is that it may happen that if we mention that we are trying to apply artificial intelligence here, and the reference that you have about those applications before, you may think that this could be like a huge business case, and probably is not the moment yet to reach that level
right.
of revenues in either way you measure that. So we have to be very conscious about what kind of expectative or expectations we may create on the people.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
Excellent. So questions from the other participants. Please bring them on. Here I'm getting one. What about the vision? What would be a bold vision for conservation and how to better define it, how to build it?
A bold vision. I think AI for climate and it's very bold. I think it didn't exist. You know, it's something very recent, and it's something bold in the sense that maybe people think of technology as being not in sync with the climate. So I think as such, it is already quite bold. Because we're looking to use technology and to make technology something available to protect the planet, and for these two maybe concepts that were on the on very very far away from each other, to help each other, right? To see how we can help nature through technology. So I think it's quite bold, and then of course, within these initiatives, you can have extremely aggressive initiatives and extremely good initiatives. But I think that every project has certainly their way of expressing their boldness. I don't know if that's answering the question, but I don't know what you think about it.
Yeah, one of the things that I like about this initiative in particular is that I have heard since the very beginning the importance that they put into the ethical use of artificial intelligence. And that, I think, makes the whole concept very bold. And it is not just the application of the technology per itself, or just because it is a buzzword. It is because there is a reason. And we are aware that if we don't take care of certain issues, we may end up not ethically applying those structures. And I think that a project that is born with that concept in mind, with that concern in mind, is going to be way better than others that after some time of moving, you try to adapt and to consider those things that were not considered in the design of the initiative.
I'm getting here another question, and it is about crowdfunding. What do you think about crowdfunding alternatives for conservation projects?
I think it's a wonderful, wonderful way to fund conservation projects. Why? Because through crowdfunding, people really feel close to the project, right? They can follow the project. They see, the advances. It's very inclusive. And as you said before, the stakeholders in these projects, every stakeholder in the projects want to be, they want to be present. People want to see what is being done with the money and with their money. So I think it's definitely, it has a huge future for these projects. And it works towards the transparency, towards the participation. And as we have the effort now on, on the website for, the photographic participation, that's the way people want to participate, right? They want to be, contributing and see, what is going on and which projects and how they can contribute and maybe implement something in their area, right? So definitely it has a lot of future.
Absolutely. And one of the things also to consider is that by using this kind of model, you make very easy for the people to participate. They have access through the technology, and it doesn't matter really where you are. You can really join and feel part of the project.
Totally.
I'm getting here the last question, because we have only 3 minutes left, and it is about the frontier. What technologies do you have under your radars which would be the frontier right now? What is the newest of the new? What is the shiniest of the shiny in terms of technology, sustainable technology, and particularly technology for conservation?
Gildardo, I think that's more your...
Okay, I'll try to say something. Well, I think that's probably what is going to be interesting in the following years is the combination of different technologies, meaning that, of course, we are generating new equipment in order to communicate, but that equipment may require energy. And if you combine that with the use of clean energies in order to put those equipments to operate, I think it is going to be way better. And of course, this trend on moving to the virtual world is going to provide a very interesting and way to work in these very complex problems. Because before, in order to model and simulate ecosystems, you had to really understand very well how the ecosystem was working, and then to translate that into equations in order to model in a computer those things and analyze what the effect of moving something may provoke. But now, through technologies like deep learning or machine learning in general and other tools from artificial intelligence may help to reduce the time in order to have those models running on a computer and then analyzing a lot of possible scenarios, and then the way you use the investment money that you have is going to be more efficient. So I think that the combination of those aspects is going to be very interesting in the following years.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to you both. This has been extraordinary, and of course, this is a conversation that could last for days.
Yes.
Thank you so very much. Isabel, there in Monaco, I hope you are doing excellent. Thank you, Hilda.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, this session is over.